Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. Today, we're waking up with watches, and everything is for sale. Reach out to me. My email address is tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Buy, sell, or trade. I'm always looking to build inventory. We pay cash, we wire direct, no upper limit on value paid. We will buy your entire collection of Grubel 4C Piece Unique. Now, that email address, if you want to buy, trade, or sell, that's me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, your email wristwatch concierge. Let's jump straight into the salacious clickbait. I promised, and now I deliver. The second of the green subs, after the Kermit, but before the Kermit, there was the Hulk. Launched in 2010 and made through 2020. The watch is, of course, 904L steel, 40 millimeters in diameter, about 12.7 millimeters thick, 300 meters water resistant. As you can see, this watch is the one that had the green sunburst dial and the green Serichrome ceramic bezel insert. The dial includes elements of gold, not just the white gold hands and indices, but the dial itself. The green coloration that's used was described on the launch of this watch as green gold, and it does include some gold elements in its chemistry. Now, the watch, of course, featuring Cyclops eye for magnification, chronometer certified, caliber 3135 inside, 48-hour power reserve, shock-resistant, anti-magnetic, and, of course, Glidelock, a quick adjustment system built into the clasp that gives you a lot of flexibility, up to 20 millimeters of full adjustment in 2 millimeter increments. You can use it to size, or you can use it to pull out all the way over a dive suit or just a thick winter coat. Of course, the watch, being a 300-meter diver, is the real deal, with a 120-click bezel that has a lovely glide to it, but still a sharp enough detent that it feels like the precision instrument it is. A good-looking watch. It fits easily on my 16-centimeter circumference wrist, so my wrist not big, but neither is the watch. It has the look of a 42 because of the 6-digit super case, which is broad, flat, and really more of a cushion than a round case. But you can see as I zoom out, the further away you get, the better it looks in proportion to my wrist, so you can really wear this on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference with no reservations. Handsome watch and versatile. Now, if you want to pare down a little bit, go farther back in Rolex history, this is a discontinued model that was made between 2015 and 2020. Of course, it is the 39 millimeter Oyster Perpetual. So the 114-300 black dial, white gold hands, white gold indices, white gold crown, plenty of lume. We'll do a quick lume shot right here. And the watch equipped with a wonderfully enduring design. The thing about this design is that it harks back to the original 1933 Oyster Perpetual, which was the first modern Rolex sports watch. You could call it the first modern Rolex watch of any kind, as it combined the Perpetual automatic winding system with the Oyster water-resistant case. Now, those early models were a little bit pot-bellied. They were bubble backs because of the extension of the case back to add the winding rotor. This is a lot flatter. It has a grace to it. And you can also see that it does pay some deference by making reference to the old bubble backs, and you can see that domed bezel here rather than the more common conical bezel used on steel Rolex watches. Here too, we have stop seconds, chronometer certification, 48-hour power reserve, and 100-meter water resistance. So no issues here wearing this watch in the water or for active lifestyle activities. Now we're going to go way up market with Autumn RPGA, and this, of course, is the 26331 in ST form Panda dial, post 2017, also known as the 20th anniversary dial. It is the Grand Tapisserie. It is the large hobnail. So a pantograph cuts this hobnail form onto a brass dial blank, and this is done with a 19th century mimicry engine, and since 2012, AP has done this in-house. Now, the watch you see right here, of course, 41 millimeters in stainless steel. You can see there's a little contrast between the silver white of the steel bezel and then the warmer tones of the white gold hexagonal bolts used in the bezel. The hands are white gold, 18 karat. We have shouldered chronograph pushers, but they are not screw downs. It is 50 meters water resistant and surface swimmable, and of course just the bracelet on this watch taking 9 to 11 hours to hand finish depending on the metal. The watch entirely hand finished, faceted, satinated, beautifully decorated, and powered by a Frederic Piguet 1185 automatic integrated high horology vertical clutch column wheel chronograph caliber. A lovely piece, a handsome flat, broad, and graceful watch. It is larger than its nominal size. I would say consider this more of a 42 or a 43, though it's rated at 41. It is quite broad across the wrist, and you can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it wears just fine. Just think of it as a larger watch because you really can't compress the bracelet all the way to the vertical position. It still flares out a bit at the edges. Let's talk about something something that offers just the same level of case finishing and bracelet finishing, but a more attractive price point and the exact same movement. This is the second generation Vacheron Constantin overseas chronograph. Here you can see 42 millimeters in steel. This one's a little bit tougher than the AP, as it's 150 meters water resistant and 25,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetic. Remember, the ISO 764 for an anti-magnetic watch only calls for hardening against 4,800 amperes per meter, so this is 25,000. So that's why you have a solid case back. There is a soft iron cage like a Milgauss around the movement. The image of the Italian naval training vessel Amerigo Vespucci on the reverse side, said to be the most beautiful square-rigged ship in the world. The dial, black on black, with plenty of lume. Maltese cross motif on the bezel, logo on the dial, knurling on the crown and pushers, on the crown face itself, repeating down the center of the links. On the clasp, you can even see the shape of the pushers cut like the edges of the Maltese cross. And you'll also note every single link in the bracelet removable, so you will be able to size this finely. Take a look at the attention to detail, the polishing within the recesses of the bracelet links, and take a look at the way the bracelet folds around the wrist. Unlike the AP, this one folds straight down, so you can wear this watch well on a smaller wrist. It fits well, it's comfortable, it's handsome, and with the distinctive double-digit date, it's actually a better looking watch in many regards than any AP Royal Oak chronograph. That double-digit date was characteristic of the first and second generation overseas chronos. It's gone on the third generation, so while the third generation is a wonderful watch, many folks like the Big Eye minutes register on this variant with the double-digit date and the presence of the bezel on top of the case without the circular plinth that sits underneath the bezel on the third generation watch. A really fine and special piece. Now here's one that, in spite of being a fairly large limited edition, you don't see too often. This is the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch Apollo 11 50th anniversary piece. As you can see, a limited edition of 6,969 pieces coming out for the 2019 model year. The sub-register for the seconds, that's constant seconds, that's actually made of solid gold and then laser ablated to create the image of the astronaut and the lunar surface and the command module. We have a bezel that is made of what Omega calls moonshine gold. It is a yellow gold that is particularly pale and beautiful. Note here we have numeral 11 up at 11 o'clock, a lot of little details, including vintage Omega logos on the dial, on the crown, and on the clasp. A vintage style flat link bracelet designed to recall the late 60s. You can see this one too pulls straight down around the wrist. Many individual removable links and a wonderfully secure trigger actuated folding clasp. You can see there are two divots drilled into the clasp, so you have a little bit of micro sizing option built in. You can also see there are many individual removable links, so you will get the right fit. This one has a sapphire crystal over the dial, and you can see that it features a ceramic insert within the gold tachymeter scale within the bezel itself, the tachymeter being on the ceramic. Now, all applique indices in yellow gold is something you don't see on a standard moonwatch, which would have a printed dial. So here you have that lovely applique gold look, and then on the back, of course, the image of the large leap for mankind. And I should mention, they were smart enough to put all the advertising on the back, all of the text, all of the anniversary edition notes, the movement, Naiad case, all the stuff you don't need to know, coaxial master chronometer, it's on the reverse side. They had the good sense to print the book on the back of the watch as opposed to on the dial of the watch. Now inside, this was the first application of the new Moonwatch caliber 3861. What's important, get a little bit more power reserve at 50 hours, now free sprung, now a silicon anti-magnetic hairspring, now a coaxial escapement, now a master chronometer. A lot to love, and you have this laser ablated image of the first step on the reverse side. The watch wears easily in steel and a little bit of yellow gold on my wrist again. It's relatively narrow across the wrist at about 48 millimeters. You can see how this would wear well with no solid end links on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters in circumference. I think this is the best value on the show today. A watch that also came out in 2019 and frankly was underestimated out of the gate. Based on the 1980 Chopard Submariner, this is the Chopard Alpine Eagle 41. Crafted out of what they call lucent steel. The steel is a little bit harder than standard steel by a few dozen Vickers, so it has a little bit more scratch and scuff resistance. The finishing, as you can see on both the case and the bracelet, is actually quite thoughtful and nicely detailed. You can also see that every individual link in the bracelet is removable, and it has a wonderfully tight set of tolerances such that no daylight's visible from the top, but if you look on the bottom, there are some calculated gaps to avoid pinching skin or pulling wrist hair. Here we have a little bit of adhesive from a sticker on the bottom. Don't mind, it's not grime, it's just a little bit of packing glue. The bezel has the look of the St. Moritz, which, if we're honest, was designed even in its day to cop many of the best features from the Gerald Gent integrated bracelet designs of the time. But the point remains, this is a watch that has a design dating back 41 years to a Chopard that existed in the early 1980s, updated with my favorite feature, this spectacular, I would call it, I guess, etched dial. It's got real depth to it. It's not simply a sunburst. I mean, this is a sunburst. This can be achieved with a lapping machine. This has real depth to it. A lovely and lush gradiated set of blues splayed out over a spiral pattern, emanating almost like an iris from the center of the dial. This is supposed to be the eagle's eye dial design, and you can see applique indices and Roman numerals. It looks really good, and it's the depth of the channels that spiral out that gives this dial its distinctive appearance. Now on the reverse side, we have a manufacturer movement. This Chopard caliber is the 0101C, 60-hour power reserve, chronometer certified, nicely decorated, an in-house movement, water resistant down to 100 meters, and as you can see, properly sized to fit the case back. It is a very comfortable watch. You can see it has a double deployant clasp. It is nicely weighted and counterbalanced by its clasp and its bracelet, and it looks good on my wrist. Overall, I'd say this watch, on ergonomic, aesthetic, and engineering terms, is far better than I expected, and it is also far more affordable than its competitors from the Holy Trinity and Longa. This is a watch you really need to consider. There's a surprising amount of hand fabrication, regulation, and finishing on this watch, and I should mention, it is nicely loomed. All right, let's jump into high horology and independent horology with Romain Gautier. Out of the Vallée de Joux, inspired by the tradition of the region and Romain Gautier's personal association and friendship with Philippe Dufour, these are watches that are nothing like Dufour's in character, but very similar in design. Not macro, micro, beveling, black polishing, satination, interior angles, that kind of design, the detail that sets these watches apart, that is inspired by Philippe Dufour. Now, taking a look at the watch that made Romain Gautier famous, the company, under the name Romain Gautier, founded by the engineer of the same name in 2005, was well regarded for its movement finish, but it wasn't a standout in terms of actual models. You tended to fall in love with the details, not the watches. That changed in 2013 with the Logical 1, which won the GPHG Complication Prize. 43 millimeters in white gold. This is from the Heritage Collection. You can see that the case itself is beautifully made with lovely hollows that have been media blasted, handsome contours, high polish by hand, and then you actually set the watch with the crown that's up at 2 o'clock, and you wind the watch with the pusher over at 9 o'clock. So you can see as soon as I start winding the watch, I move the chain from the barrel to the fusee, and the watch starts right up. Fully wound, it has a 46-hour power reserve. The dials for the hours, minutes, and seconds are grand faux enamel. Romain Gautier makes the entire movement right down to the free-sprung balance in the wheels. You can see there's a little bit of a recursive wheel inside a wheel design. If that looks familiar, it's because Romain Gautier, which is partially owned by Chanel, also makes the wheels for the Chanel high horology watches, such as the Monsieur de Chanel. You can see satination across some of the bridges. You can also see a lovely frosted finish, a lovely matte finish, sharp interior angles, too many to count, not one, not two, but dozens. Black polished screws, an open barrel showing you the mainspring internally, and then you can see not only do we have sharp interior angles, but we have sharp outward points. This is as difficult to achieve as interior angles, and it's even less common in high horology finish. The fusee and chain is a rethink of the constant force device that emerged from the late Renaissance. So you have this wheel that is attached to the barrel, pulling an entirely black polished chain, which is full of pivot jewels, 26 jewels just inside the chain, and I'll see if I can show you that. You can see the violet of the jewels in the chain. Well, As the barrel pulls this fusee, the fusee is connected to the drivetrain that runs the escapement. The fusee also has this snail cam on top, so as the barrel torque runs down, it pulls a larger effective lever arm, increasing the force to the escapement. So as you lose barrel torque, the mechanical advantage builds, which allows constant force to be applied to the escapement for the full 46 hours of power reserve. As you can see, the bridge containing the fusee and chain, it has an entirely black polished center, no fewer than, well, let's count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 interior angles. That is very special. This watch exhausts superlatives, and while it is large, it's not excessively large. I can wear it comfortably, and I believe you could wear this watch comfortably and handsomely down to a wrist size of 15 centimeters in circumference. But if you want a smaller option with no loss of quality or attention to the details that make or break a watch, the Insight Micro Rotor in titanium is for you. You can see this model, launched in 2018, was a follow-up to 2017's Insight Micro Rotor, the first automatic Romain Gautier watch. 80-hour power reserve, multiply finished platinum micro rotor, and you can see a 10-piece limited edition. Again, you can see those wheels with the circle-in-circle design and the uncompromising finish with bevels so broad and bright you don't even need a loop to appreciate them. Black polish run amok. It is everywhere. Turn it over, and you can see once again we have the Grand Faux enamel, no expense spared, full balance bridge, and a free-sprung balance architecture. Gautier is making those components in-house. You can also see how there's a little bit of a contrast here. We have a more traditionally pocket watch-inspired caseback with these handsome frosted matte finish bridges, and then we turn it all over, and it's a little bit more avant-garde with a longitudinal satination across the bridges on the dial side, and again, those many sharp interior breaks where two bevels meet. Proprietary black polished screws that allow Gautier watchmakers to apply more torque and create more security. All of this 13 millimeters thick and 39.5 millimeters in diameter in grade 5 titanium. It is very light. Gautier makes only 50 to 60 watches a year, and I should mention this year the Logical 1 is being phased out, so the watch that made the brand is pretty much done with production. Orders are being fulfilled based on existing requests. No new orders are being taken. So this watch is becoming much more collectible, and the Gautier brand as a whole is on the rise. I think it needs to be discussed alongside Dufour and Voutilanen, because even though Gautier himself is not a watchmaker, the volumes and the quality are comparable. Gautier is an engineer and an uncompromising one who pushes his watchmakers to achieve excellence. Throwing this watch on the wrist, you can see it would wear well on a wrist even as small as perhaps 13.5 centimeters circumference. Really nice, handsome, very practical, 80-hour power reserve, and if you want the automatic Romain Gautier, this is it. Speaking a bit of the grande dame of high horology watchmaking, Patek Philippe, and two standouts. First, let's talk about the 5196P in platinum. This watch is under 7 millimeters thick. As you can see, beautifully rendered, platinum, 37 millimeters in diameter, and historically inspired by the reference 565, many examples of which featured these lovely gold brigade-style Arabic numerals, sub-seconds, and leaf-style hands. You can see there are several different finishes on this dial. We have a satinated matte finish or opaline track for the minutes outboard with polished dimple-style individual minute markers. We have a concentric circular satin brushed silvered finish, and then we have that opaline on the center with a light texturing or guilloche for the sub-seconds, and then you can see a high-polished ring separating the hour track from the center dial. A lot of detail going on here. And of course, because it's a modern platinum Patek, it features a top Vesselton diamond brilliant cut between the lugs. Turn it all over, mirror polished case back. My fingerprints are probably offending here, but you can see the condition is outstanding. The watch features a caliber 215, Geneva hallmark manual wind, 44-hour power reserve, Gyromax free-sprung balance, anti-magnetic silicone hairspring. A lot to love. Throw it on the wrist. I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 13 centimeters in circumference. This is the best of Patek Philippe. deference to its history, reference to its best models, uncompromising design, even in simple form. This watch is beautiful despite not being a complication. It represents Patek Philippe at its absolute finest. Now, let's take a quick look at a very scarce version of the already scarce 5134 travel time watch, the successor of the late 1950s 2597 travel time. It is a special edition co-signed by retailer Gobelin, as you can see on the brown bronze dial. This yellow gold model, which is 37 millimeters in diameter, features a nicely cloaked set of travel time pushers. Again, this is a reference to the system Patek Philippe developed with Louis Gautier in the late 1950s. It allows you to hide that second time zone if you don't want it. You also have a 24-hour dial up at the top of the dial, so you know that second time zone is indicating, for example, 5 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the evening. And you can see, because we are into the second half of the day on the 24-hour dial, we are looking at 5 o'clock in the evening. Now, you also have a wonderfully domed bezel, a simple but strong set of blended lugs, and on the reverse side, celebrating 150 years of Gobelin. I mentioned the 215 caliber on the 5196P here. You can actually see it, and you can see that it is a nicely finished movement. It is finished identically in this watch, but to make this watch thinner, Patek went with a solid case back. Solid case backs are thinner. Here, Patek thought, well, I'm going to use the case back to put the movement on display and also pay tribute to the partnership with the retailer Gobelin. A lovely double-signed 37mm travel time Calatrava with a full clasp in yellow gold. I often say that yellow gold works best in smaller, more traditional sizes, and that's certainly the case right here with this model in yellow gold. But what really gets me is the elegance of the travel time dial and that brown bronze color used for the travel time dial. Okay, here is something special, something very rarely seen. This right here is a 20-piece limited edition in platinum, launched as a USA edition back in 2018. This is the SPGA 385. It's the rarest of the Kirazuri dials and the finest from a horological standpoint. So there were 3 USA edition models called Kirazuri, launched in 2018 for US boutiques. This model in platinum features the most exclusive combination of case, dial, and movement. So first you can see it is all platinum, and it's finished the way any Zaratsu polished, that is tin plate finished, Grand Seiko would be. Mirrored, optically flawless, smooth, with none of the orange peel rippling that can develop on a finished platinum surface. It's one thing to execute the tin plate polishing on steel and gold and titanium. To do it on platinum is the ultimate example of the case finisher's art. And you can see that it is not a simple case. Creases, curves, polyhedron lug profiles at the tip, and of course the break between satin and polish. And all of this 100 meters water resistant. You have a full clasp, and this is one of the rare cases where I have seen a brand not wimp out and try to use harder white gold, but instead use a harder grade of platinum for the folding element of a clasp. Here you can see that clasp is made of a combination of 950 and the rarely seen PT900, so that the clasp could be platinum in its entirety with no need for the more rigid white gold and some of the more delicate folding components. 900 is as hard as white gold. Now you can also see that the 40mm watch, which is short from lug to lug, wears really nicely on a small wrist. All in platinum. You can feel the weight. It's massive, but it's not big, and it sits pretty low, so you can fit it underneath the cuff. Surprisingly, it's 100 meters water resistant, so on a different strap you can swim with this watch. Kirazuri, it means basically shiny painting in Japanese, and that was the impression that the designers of this dial wanted to convey. It is a hand-finished case with a handmade dial, as Grand Seiko artisans do things like fire blue the second hand, or individually facet and polish the applique indices and the hands, which are finished on diamond-tipped milling tools, which are run by artisans who only create these components all day long. Stop seconds, quick set date, power reserve indicator, 3-day automatic winding power reserve, caliber 9R15, which is a hot-rodded spring drive. So you have that little solid gold medallion. So a standard spring drive movement of this generation would have been plus or minus 15 seconds a day. That little medallion means that this version is, well, pardon me, plus or minus 15 seconds per month is a standard spring drive. This is plus or minus 10 seconds per month. So 10 seconds a month, remember a COSC certified mechanical chronometer can lose 4 or gain 6 seconds per 24 hours. This is 10 or better per month. You can also see that the movement is powered by a spring. There is no battery, there are no capacitors, there are no stepper motors. The spring action drives this unidirectional governing wheel, which wakes up a quartz oscillator by creating an induced electrical current. A electromagnetic force is created that will break the speed of that wheel. The mechanical drivetrain from the barrel passes through this wheel, which acts as a governor that slows or speeds up the hand on the dial. So you have complete mechanical drive or spring drive of a hand that sweeps completely smooth. It took from 1977 to 1977 to 1999 to bring the basic version of spring drive to market, and 1977 to 2005 to bring automatic spring drive to market. This is a very cool system with mechanical soul and quartz precision, and again, 20 pieces, a limited edition, a Grand Seiko to compete with a Calatrava, and you will never see another one. Let's take a look at something very different. First, Omega. This is group brand meets independent. As the 57-piece platinum Omega Speedmaster Moonface skeleton that I hold in my hand was launched in 2003. 57 pieces made with platinum case and an entirely skeletonized and hand-engraved movement. This is the caliber 2604. The work was done by the great and late Armin Strom. So he was an expert in skeletonizing and engraving generally Unitas, Lamagna, and ETA calibers. And that's exactly what he did here with these 57 pieces. No two are exactly alike because all of the engraving on the 3604 was done by hand. So he used a burin and he used a small hammer and he created these patterns so that each example is effectively a piece unique. You also know that if the watch ever needs service, you send it back to Omega. Very simple. The caliber 3604 is based on the 1866, which is a moonwatch caliber equipped with a radial date and a moon phase. So this is a Speedmaster Professional, and yes, it is a Speedmaster Professional because it includes the Speedmaster Professional Lamagna-based caliber, albeit as you've never seen it. Not only has it been skeletonized and engraved, but if you look on the edge of the bridge, you can see that it is also blessed with mirrored beveling and fired blue screws, so we also have mirrored anglage on both the steel components of the chronograph and the bridges, or what remains of the bridges. The watch has incredible heft in the hand, and as you can see, it features a matching full deployant clasp. Throw it on the wrist, and you get the sense that you're dealing with a true haute horlogerie piece from an independent, which in a lot of ways you are, as Strom created these watches to be artisanal, not mass-produced, and Omega partnered with Strom to give the watch a soul that a factory-built moonwatch could never have by itself. Now you can see there's individual numbering. It is on the dial. 4757. The dial is a lovely frosted opaline with applique blued indices and lovely skeletonized hands at center. Another watch, this one a true independent. This is the Toric GMT from Parmigiani Fleurier, and I adore this watch. Rose gold, 36 millimeters, blued hands in the Parmigiani Delta style. You can see it has a concentric guilloche on a gray dial that features a handsome silver opaline below polished cabochon style hour indices. Now, it is a dual time, but it is also a jump hour. That's right, a 24-hour format jump hour display at 12 o'clock for the second time zone. What you do is you first set the second time zone and then you back up to set your second time. And it is a lovely instantaneous change jump with a unique typeface created specifically for this model. Every single numeral is an absolute pleasure. I love this watch. Automatic winding, it features a 50-hour power reserve with a Vacher caliber and a lovely guilloche cut winding rotor. The Vacher caliber is traditionally finished with mirrored anglage, as you can see quite well, black polished screw heads. There's satination on the base plate. You can also see that there are lovely Côte de Genève across the bridges, and it uses a high horology 5-position adjustment, plus this handsome rose lathe turned and quadruple finished rotor at center. A very, very special piece. I love jump hours. I love the Parmigiani Toric case. You could see old school assembly with the welds barely visible between the lugs and the case, and you can see just how much slope this case has, almost like a disco volante case from the 1950s, with these coined profiles and split by lovely domed gadroons. It's supposed to be the look of a Greek column compressed vertically, and it truly is that. The lugs are constructed separate from the case, inserted into slots in the case flank, and then welded together with evidence of the weld removed. It is a very artisanal way of making a case, and you can see a lovely blue sapphire cabochon was used. We even have a buckle that matches the coining of the bezel. Lovely design parallelism that I applaud, and this watch is suitable for a wrist as small as 13 centimeters circumference, because it's just not that big. It's beautifully proportioned, beautifully detailed, clever in the way it tells its time, and super flat so it'll fit underneath the dress cuff. This is a watch that wears colored gold well. I often think that vintage watches and smaller watches work best with rose or yellow gold, and this watch is a testament to that. That said, sometimes Grubel 4C will convince you you cannot have too much of a good thing. And at 44.5 millimeters in rose gold, that is certainly what you get from this Tourbillon 24 secondes contemporain. It is the contemporary version of their 24-second tourbillon. So Grubel 4C watches, since 2004, the product of Robert Grubel and Stephen 4C, Grubel on the aesthetic side, 4C on the technical side, out of Le Chaux de Fonds, making no more than 120 watches per year, so they're always exclusive. They peg the meter for technical and aesthetic virtuosity, as many folks have often said that Grubel 4C finish is the finest in the industry. And I recently interviewed watchmaker David Walter, who knows a thing or two about fine finish, and he said in his estimation Grubel 4C is number one. Let's take a look at why. First, the obvious stuff. We do have a tourbillon, which, as you can see, is on a perpetual sloped plane, so it does work to cancel out the effects of gravity even when it is relatively static sitting on your dresser. It also has a 24-second period, so it makes a circuit every 24 seconds. Remember, a conventional wristwatch tourbillon will be about 60 seconds. A traditional pocket watch tourbillon will be anywhere from 3 to 6 minutes. So this thing is absolutely manic. You can see there's an upper bridge made of sapphire so that you really get an unobstructed view of the tourbillon assembly, which is both free-sprung and equipped with a handmade overcoil. The watch is a manual wind 72-hour power reserve. It is loomed. We will do a loom shot. So you can see, this is a surprisingly practical Grubel. Now, everything underneath the gold applique indices, that is a sapphire track that floats above base plates made, or I should say bridges and base plate, made of titanium. Grubel 4C uses a process for bluing the titanium plates to create this dramatic contrast between components and base. You can also see that there is a bridge on which the hands are mounted, which is satinated on its side and then mirror beveled. You can also note and appreciate that all of the screws here are black polished with chamfered slots and circumference, and the entirety of the tourbillon carriage has been black polished. Turn it all over, and you can see traditional pocket watch finishing. First of all, this watch, Lucky 7, out of a 33-piece limited edition, very exclusive, frosted bridges, and here it looks like they've frosted using a wire brush. That's probably the technique applied. And if you look carefully, you can see, well, you don't really need to look very carefully because the bevels are a mile wide. They light up and they're practically blinding. The interior angles are particularly sharp, and you can see here on the case back, we have blued and black polished screws. We have both. We also have Maillot or nickel copper zinc bridges here. They are rhodium plated. They use that same material that would have been used on pocket watches and is today used on longa bridges. Take a look at the spokes and the interiors of the wheels. The interior of the wheels as well as the spokes have been mirror beveled. Very few brands, even Geneva Seal brands, will actually bevel the interior of wheels as well as the spokes. You'll also note that there are sharp inner angles where the spokes meet rim, meaning innumerable interior angles have been applied at a micro scale with in these wheels. And we have golden chaton fixing the pivot jewels, a nod to the era of golden chaton pivots in vintage pocket watches. Everything about this watch, even including the substantial and double finished buckle, exhausts superlatives. You can see the concave profile of the lugs, one of Robert Grubel's most subtle and successful design elements. The text is just the philosophy of Grubel Forsey as watchmakers and designers en français. A spectacular watch, 44.5 millimeters in diameter. It is large. I would not wear it on a wrist smaller than mine, but as you can see, big is the style. It's not supposed to be a discreet watch. It probably will fit underneath a jacket, but not the tightest of dress sleeves. Down the barrel, it's not really overlapping the edge of my wrist, though you can see from the top it's right out to the edge. Again, 16 centimeter circumference wrist or larger, you're getting the world's best finish and possibly the world's most animated tourbillon. Take one last good look at that. No compromise. We finish up with some of my favorites from L'Auberson, making only 150 watches a year and fewer than 3,000 since their founding in 2002, de Bethune. They make their cases, their dials, and their movements all, and they probably have more patents relative to the number of watches made than any company other than Rolex, Seiko, or Swatch as a group. Here we have two examples of the 40 millimeter de Bethune DB28. Here we have a high jewelry piece. This is the DB28 Haute Joaillerie. It is a lovely white gold with a combination of diamonds, and we'll get as close as we can here, but a combination of diamond on the dial and artisanal settings. Paved caseband, paved, and snow set lugs and bezel. Note, not all the diamonds are of the same size, and everything has been dressed extraordinary. They do their own gem setting, they do their own engraving. All of this in a company that only makes 150 watches a year. The dial of lapis lazuli set with gems, the image of the cosmos, and the twinkle of the minerals in the lapis, but you also get the larger celestial bodies as brilliant cut set gems. Simple, wearable, subtle. This is a man's watch with gems that from an arm's length doesn't even read as a diamond timepiece. What it reads as is graceful and in good taste. No branding, discretion, modesty. Why? Because the person who knows high horology will know what this is. He'll see the thin caseband. He'll see the signature evacuated lugs, and he'll know what he's looking at. The gawker will walk right on past. Only 3 examples of this watch as you see it here were made. Turn over to the case back, very special. You can see the movement, which has a 6-day manual wind power reserve, is entirely black polished. Not a screw, not a regulator, the whole movement. 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs, that's the triple parachute, patented. Twin self-adjusting barrels, patented. Titanium and platinum yoke-style balance, patented. Patented hairspring, patented silicone escape wheel, all of that, and immaculately hand-finished with the black polish, as well as the mirrored anglage on the edge of the bridges. So though it is avant-garde, it is finished with respect for traditional horological detail. Now, let's say you want something that is even a little bit more traditional than that. Well, here we have their own rose lathe guilloche dial, solid. Something de Bethune watches are all extravagant, oversized, open dial, Star Trek inspired. Not this one. The DB28 collection came out in 2007 to give de Bethune collectors something a little bit more subtle than some of the more extravagant shapes. The dial here is closed. It is silver with blue on silver print. We have fired blue titanium hands. The center dial features a rosette pattern radiating out. And again, that is real reductive rose lathe guilloche, not a stamped pattern. You can see the depth of the dial. The case here, same design as the high jewelry piece we just saw, but rose gold unset, and then the case back with automatic winding. Still a 6-day power reserve, still triple parachute shock protection. We have everything that you saw on the other watch with one major exception. Here, we also have a patented shock protection system for the balance, or I should say for the rotor bearing. So the rotor bearing has these little cantilever springs with gems set in them so they avoid stiction. And this is a shock protection system for the rotor that allows the rotor to be enormous with a huge effective lever arm, the platinum out on the edge, and the rest of the rotor in blued titanium. A very efficient winding system, and again, you can see all of the technologies from the other watch are present here. It's just a little bit of a different aesthetic with the automatic caliber 2024. This watch, again, more discreet, probably the watch for those who are looking to move from the likes of a Moser or an FP Journe to a more exotic and even more exclusive high horology independent. And de Bethune is certainly where I will put my own money when I get back into the collecting game. It is my favorite brand. They make my favorite watches. Now, these are more discreet and mutually discontinued. They don't make the 40mm case in either style anymore. They simply don't offer it. But if you want the watch that made de Bethune famous, you want this. Launched in 2010, this is the winner of the 2011 GPHG Aiguille d'Or, effectively Best Picture at the Oscars of Watchmaking. This is the titanium DB28. The DB28 took a number of threads of de Bethune design, David Zanetta designing, Denis Flageolet watchmaker engineering. And here we have the little cabochon bullets at the end of the lugs, a reference to the original 2002 DB1 chronograph. We have the floating lugs that were introduced on the 2008 DB26 perpetual calendar, and the moon phase that was first introduced on the DBS. So now you can see the watch is all in titanium, 42.7 millimeters, only 11 millimeters thick with these variable geometry spring-loaded floating lugs. It's an easy watch to wear. On the case back, power reserve indicator, 6-day power reserve, bullhead crown, screw-down action, manually wound. We have a spherical moon phase. It is a sphere, 1/2 blued steel, 1/2 white palladium. The individual hours are cabochon of black polished titanium. We have nickel anthracite coating on movement, plate, and bridges that feature Côte de Bethune, and they actually reverse the wheel that lays down the stripes. So you can see the dark ridge of the waves is facing outward on both sides. They reverse the wheel to achieve that. The bracing for the barrel bridge, as well as the anchor point for the shock protection, black polished. You can see the shock protection springs for the triple parachute have been blued, fired blue. Here we have both blued screws and we have black polished screws. The bridge for the balance is fully specular finished or black polished. The moon phase need be adjusted by this pusher once every roughly 1,027 years. You can see there is traditional mirrored anglage on the edge of the bridges here, and we can also appreciate that the wheels feature satination. This is their 2010 patent balance. They have over 8 patented balances. It is a solid disc of silicone with a continuous white gold rim, minimally reactive to temperature changes. Neither hot nor cold will change its regularity. It is also aerodynamic, as there are no masses deployed outboard of the white gold rim. It also maximizes the mass in the edge of the balance. Then you have that 2-element flat hairspring, 2 pieces bent by hand and clamped together, giving you the concentric breathing of an overcoil, but with the shock resistance and thin profile of a flat hairspring. You can also see that the dial has phenomenal depth when viewed from any angle, and again, with fewer than 3,000 watches made by de Bethune since 2002, and 150 roughly being made per year, they are rare watches. It sits low, it sits flat, all in titanium, it sits light. I have no problem wearing it on my wrist. I think this is a brand that's going places, and on that note, I finish with what could only be the final watch of the show. For this watch or any you see here, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.